Thank you for joining us on NTV today. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and we have a lot lined up for you in as far as current affairs are concerned, and we'll be touching base with some of our reporters across the country to bring us up to speed in as far as what's going on in their regions. And of course, the conversations in studio today, very informative, very engaging. One of them is about cervical cancer and HPV vaccine. Now, if you remember sometime last year, the government actually said they were going to roll out the HPV vaccine, but that seems not to have happened yet, since they had said this will be done in May of this year. We'll get into it, and also the importance of this in as far as curtailing the numbers of those living with cervical cancer is concerned. I'm already joined by three panelists in studio to have that discussion, and later on we'll also delve into something that marks today. Today is the World Safety Food Day. It's actually the first of its kind worldwide, and we'll be telling you why it's important to actually mark this day, and I'll also have a panel helping us understand that more. But for now, let's start off with the conversation on cervical cancer. To help us walk this talk is Dr. Jane Wakahe. She is a gynecologist and obstetrician. She's a reproductive expert. You've been at this for a long time. Thank you for joining us. Rehab Naserian Kisopia, who is a patient. She had HPV, but thankfully her indulgence with Daktari here, that was able to be actually turned around. She actually does not have cervical cancer, and she'll tell us her story. And of course, we have Mary Mudave, who is a palliative nurse. Thank you, ladies, for joining me. Now, Daktari, let's start with you. When we hear about cervical cancer, the question is, what exactly is going on in the cervix for it to be cancerous?
The cervix gets infected with something called human papillomavirus,
Which is what we're calling HPV.
which is HPV. Now, there are about 100 of those, but 15 of them are known to be high risk to causing cancer of the cervix. So they will invade an area of the cervix called the transformational zone. And if there is persistent invasion with human papillomavirus, then the cells will start to change towards cancer. Fortunately, they take a long time, and there are ways of checking that are they changing towards cancer or not. So it gives us about 10 to 20 years to actually check that if somebody is infected with HPV, they don't have to necessarily get cancer.
So if we have 10 to 20 years, it explains why there is the importance of doing your regular pap smear.
Yes. Yes.
So when you do this test, what exactly would the doctor be looking out for?
When we do a pap smear, the doctor will tell you some results. Now, the results can tell you that you're absolutely normal, which is good, until you come next year. They'll also tell you that there's some changes, very, very mild changes called ASCOs. And they will try to treat and tell you, check again in about a year or 6 months. They may tell you there is something called low grade. Now we are progressing from the normal towards cancer. They may tell you there is something called low grade. And when it is low grade lesion, then again we treat and watch, especially if somebody is young, because many young people are able to beat the virus and actually get rid of it. So that one will also just treat and watch. But there is another set that will say it's either high grade. Now, if the pap smear says high grade or says cancer, then we have to deal with it.
Okay,
Yes.
and we'll delve deeper into the HPV, because I think it's the primary cause for cancer at this point. And just in case you're just joining us, the importance of having this conversation is, first of all, every day in Kenya, at least 8 women die from cervical cancer. Now, as of December last year, which is 2018, 5,250 women were newly diagnosed with cervical cancer. Out of those, 3,286 actually succumbed to cervical cancer. As Daktari is saying, this is something that can actually be curtailed, and we'll delve deeper into that. Now, let me bring in Naserian. Naserian, you went to Daktari and you were told that you had the HPV and it was leading to cancer. Give us your journey. What took you to the doctor to start with? Ni nini uliona?
Ya kwanza nilianza kuwa na pimples, nikashindwa ni za nini. Nikaenda kwa daktari mwingine, lakini nikaambiwa niende kwa gynecologist. So bwanangu akaniambia gynecologist yule anajua ni Jane Wakahe. So akanipeleka huko. Nikapimwa. Ile kupimwa akaona kuna shida. So akaniambia basi dawa ni kufanya major operation. Na kweli niliandago hiyo operation na Mungu akawa Mungu. Kwa sasa hivi niko na miaka 21.
Kutoka siku ile?
Yeah.
Oh wow. That's very encouraging.
Yes.
Umesema ulikuwa na pimples.
Yeah.
What other symptoms did you have? Because we have the possibility of vaginal discharge. Kuna wale wana bleed during intercourse. Hakukuwa na other symptoms? Okay.
Hakukuwa naye. Lakini unajua mtu ambaye anapenda kujitengeneza, unaona tu ni nini, una change cream inakataa. So sasa hiyo ikanifanya nikasikia pana, kwa sababu ilikuwa mbaya sana.
Okay.
Na kwa sasa hivi mimi naambia kina mama wasiogope.
Ukiona kitu uliza swali.
Uliza swali, nenda kwa daktari.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now back to you, Daktari.
Yes.
She talks about just pimples within the reproductive area,
Yes.
but there are other symptoms that can tell you something is off. How is it that it ranges or is different from one person to another?
Actually, the thing is that there is no symptoms that can tell you something is off. That's the problem with cancer cervix. That until it becomes cancer, there are no symptoms.
At all?
At all.
Okay.
Even that bleeding after sex comes when there is already a lesion. There is already a problem. So for those 10 years that we are progressing with it, there are no symptoms. That's the problem. There's not even a discharge. And hence why we want women to be checked, because you will land into what is called early cancer. Like she actually had cancer, not just HPV.
Oh.
She had cancer of the cervix. You will land there with nothing. By the time the symptoms appear, it is actually late.
So she only had pimples around her vaginal area?
No,
Yes.
my face.
Your face?
Yeah.
Not even the reproductive
No,
area?
no.
Yes.
Okay, this is interesting.
Yes.
So the symptoms manifest differently for different people?
That wasn't even a symptom of anything to do with the cervix. We thank God that she managed to appear.
Yes.
There are some things that cause pimples on the face that have to do with ovaries.
Okay.
So when the other doctor sent her to me, they were wanting me maybe to check that there is no polycystic ovaries. That's another thing that causes pimples on the face.
Yes.
So I think that's what they were after me checking. But in the routine, we did a pap smear.
And hiyo ilikuwa pap smear yako ya kwanza?
Yeah.
And how old were you?
38.
38, which speaks to how many women go for pap smears to start with, right?
In fact, as of 2014, only 14% of women in this country had ever gone for pap smear. And we're talking including the elite. And if you took 3 years from that time, then only within the last 3 years, only 3.6% had gone for pap smear.
Including the elite.
Including the elite.
Interesting, interesting. Now, Mary, let's really lean into this conversation. You have taken care of people who've had full-blown cervical cancer. When you hear her story and seeing the people who now are leaving full-blown cervical cancer, what is the gap? What is this that people miss, or women generally miss, in as far as the symptoms are concerned?
I think people may not really be having the understanding about what cervical cancer is all about. And as the doctor says, the symptoms comes later on. But you know, if they could only be going for those pap smears yearly, it will help greatly. Remember, symptoms comes later on. But when it comes to full-blown cancer, it's really pathetic because of the pain, the false smelling that comes, the discharge. I mean, it's just the patient just even feels just emotionally drained, because you really lose your stigma as a person. You feel like, you don't want to meet people because of especially the smell that comes with it. It's really bad. And you know, it calls for a doctor, and also the pain, and it calls for a doctor whom you can, every time you're calling, what do? We have to keep on changing the medication, the painkillers, having some maybe pessaries to insert it also, that you can reduce that kind of a smell. And just working with a patient as a person. And of course, also the family, because they also get affected at the end of it all. It's just a whole scenario that affects everybody around them. And the smell is really something of a big concern. Yeah. So I just wish people could not reach to that level. Yeah.
Okay. For you, Nasirian, after you underwent the surgery, how long after were you clear of the cancer?
I can't even remember because I didn't go back.
So after the surgery, you were done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Daktari, tell me what exactly happened with her, because it sounds like for her it was a walk in the park. Eh? What exactly happened with her?
We discovered that she had early cancer of the cervix and took her for a very major operation called Vaccination operation, which removes basically all the reproductive system of the woman and follows the direction where the cancer would have spread by lymph. So we did that. It's a very, very major operation.
And what's the difference between that and a hysterectomy?
Oh, very big. The hysterectomy removes just the uterus, plus or minus the cervix sometimes.
Okay.
This one removes the uterus, removes the ovaries, goes down into the vagina and cuts a bit of it, and goes into the sides of the pelvis and removes any nodes that could have carried cancer to that direction. So it's a most major, in fact, it's the most major gynecological operation that we do. Fortunately for her, when we did that big operation, it was found that the cancer was actually containerized within that area. So she didn't need any further treatment. Yes.
Okay.
She was free of cancer as soon as the operation was done.
Okay, she is one in many that actually has that kind of a journey. You're blessed for sure, Nasirian. Now, Mary, even as you talk about the symptoms and what you have to live with when you have to live with full-blown cervical cancer, the smell that you talk about, the discharge you talk about, could easily be misdiagnosed for a yeast infection.
Exactly.
Yeah. And right now, just speaking to some doctors, they say if there's a time that they are having patients walk in because of yeast infections, is today more than ever before. So how now do you tell the difference?
Now, you know, we work hand in hand with the doctor, who of course will have done several investigations. And by the time it reaches the full-blown, now these actually are pressure symptoms, which now are affecting all these systems. Because there's also, you know, you can also discharge some tissue. It's actually like a growth of bacteria within that line of system. So basically that's how it is.
But for the yeast infection, if I come to you as a nurse, how will you tell the difference between a yeast infection and symptoms of cervical cancer?
I'll always refer you to a gynecologist. Yeah, that's how the doctor will be able to do more investigations and be able to tell the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for you as a nurse, you cannot look at it and say, okay, fine, this is a usual yeast infection, but you have to refer? We
have to refer. We try to avoid, you know, buying drugs on the chemist.
Yes, over the counter.
Yeah, on the counter. So the best is to refer you to a gynecologist or any doctor to do more investigation and find out what is the cause of this, so that you have started on treatment immediately, the right treatment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nasirian, kabla upate the cancer, uliwahi kuwa na shida yoyote ya uzazi?
Hapana.
Watoto ulikuwa na wangapi by then?
3.
Na ukuwahi kuwa na shida yoyote?
Hapana.
Okay. Now, the reason why I'm asking her that is because we know that HPV is sexually transmitted.
Yes.
So that means anyone who is sexually active is actually prone
Yes.
to getting it.
Yes.
How come some women are more prone to than others?
Actually, every woman is prone to getting HPV if they happen to be there. And any person who's ever been sexually active or whose genitalia have touched each other, and this I'm talking even same-sex genitalia, then they are prone to getting human papillomavirus. Now, of the people that catch human papillomavirus, 80% of them, especially the youth, deal with it. I mean, the body deals with it. The way you get affluent, you clear it. So it's only a small minority, like 20%, who it persists. But even in those 20%, it's only like 5% of them who will actually get the progression to cancer. So who are these people who are prone to getting that direction? The main one we know now is, of course, people with other STIs. Anybody else, anybody with any other sexually transmitted infection would, and especially the immune compromised. We are talking here HIV positive people, whether or not they are on treatment. The fact that they have the HPV, the HIV, the HPV tends to be more aggressive towards them. So that's a team, in fact, we tell not just the yearly pap smear, but maybe every 6 months a pap smear. Yes.
So apart from that, what else would make somebody prone? Older people, because as we grow older, our immunity gets not able to fight so well. So the young will usually beat it, but come age 35 there, and you get an infection with HPV, you are likely to have it permanently and to have it change towards cancer. Okay, so we're talking about age here, and I'm sure, Mary, you've dealt with patients with cervical cancer that are pretty young.
Yeah.
What's the youngest you've dealt with?
The youngest was actually 42 years.
42.
Yeah.
So never younger than that.
Never younger than that I've taken care of.
Okay, and when they come to the point where they're living with a full-blown cancer, do you look back at the family history to start with to see if there was any of that? Maybe it would be telling why they would be prone to it.
Yes, we do that, because a number of the cases that I've dealt with, there is some history of cancer in the family. Not necessarily cervical, but of course cervical is of more, but there's also some history of cancer in the family. Yeah, so by the time they reach on that palliative care actually at home, it's because of cost implications.
Yes.
It's actually cost implications, and so you just must have know how to communicate and deal with this family, be able to work with them. It's a journey that affects the patient, that affects the family as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. Nasirian, we're talking about the genetic predisposition. Kuna mtu kwa familia yako ama yenyu ambaye alikuwa na kansa ama ashawahi kuwa na kansa?
Kuna ndugu yangu mmoja alikuwa na kansa ya damu.
That's leukemia.
Ya leukemia. Sasa hiyo iliweza kumshika na akafariki. Na hata pia kulikuwa na mtoto mdogo hivi majuzi tu, miaka kadhaa, naye pia alikuwa na hiyo
leukemia bado.
Yeah. Naye akaenda.
Okay.
Kama miezi 3 hivi iliyopita, kunaye msichana wa ndugu yangu pia alikuwa na kansa ya uterus. Sasa hakuweza kujua, so akafariki.
Okay. Now, Dr. clearly from her story, you can see signs that her being predisposed was 100% compared to somebody who doesn't have cancer in their family. So if you do know that you have cancer, should you be more aware of and be more rigorous, I guess, in going for these tests to ensure that you're not a victim?
All other cancers, yes. All other cancers are familial, are predisposed in families. Cancer cervix is not. Cancer cervix, 99.7% of all cancer cervixes is because somebody has been infected with human papillomavirus. So that is not a predisposition, the genetics in cancer cervix. But it is in things like cancer breast, cancer liver, cancer colon, leukemia, all those. So people should actually, not just cancer cervix, people should have a yearly screening of all kinds of cancer, especially when they reach age 35 and above, because then they start to enter the cancer age. But the good thing about cancer cervix is the one cancer that we know what causes it. It's the human papillomavirus. Unlike the others, which really nobody knows what causes them. They are predisposed in families.
Okay, and I'm asking this because with her family history, you have said there are those that fight it off like a flu, then there is that small percentage that just carries on into the cancerous cells. Now, from her history, it sounds like her body clearly was a bit predisposed to it, if you were to put it that way. Yeah, to fight this. Now, as we're still talking about this, it's sexually transmitted. That means it takes two to tango. The man has brought something to the lady, and the lady is either going to fight it or it's going to build up to be a cancerous, to be cancerous cells. Question is, do men also fall are they prone to cancer because of a HPV?
They carry the HPV, very, very, very rare, where statistics are almost impossible to talk about.
Yes.
They may get penile cancer, but that is not even really proven that is the HPV, but otherwise they carry.
Okay, but the chances are very low.
Yes.
Okay, so what is this about our reproductive organs, theirs and ours, that makes ours harbor the cancerous cells and not them?
There's an area in the woman's cervix. It's called a transformation zone.
Yeah.
There are two types of cells in the uterus. Some are, shall I say, above, and some are below. Now there's an area there called transformation zone that makes the cells above and the cells below. It decides which ones to get. Now that's a very sensitive area because cells are always growing. And actually that's where the HPV, when HPV hits there, that's when it causes it to get cancer, because the cells are really, really fast growing there. So that's why it is so prone there. Yes.
Okay, now let's talk to the nurse, and she tells us, do you have any experience where the man has actually succumbed to this because of a HPV?
No, we don't have.
Mostly it's women.
Mostly it's women.
Okay, are there any girls in this? I know you said the youngest you've seen is 42. Do we have any young girls?
I just heard of one, although I never met her to interview her, but I heard of one actually who was 30 years old. That was the one I heard about.
The youngest.
Yeah, the youngest one, yeah.
Okay, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we're talking about the HPV vaccine. Now, as you know, the government had actually said they were going to roll out the vaccine. May was supposed to be the month we're going to see this, and any child or girl of age 10 and above was supposed to get this. Was it just 10 or 10 to 13?
It's 10 to 13.
10 to 13. So why this age group? Why introduce the vaccine at that point in life?
Because it is the time that they have not yet become sexually active. They have not yet been infected with HPV, so they can be vaccinated against it. Yes.
And what happens to the rest of us that are grown? But we could be prone to this because, as you said, as long as you're sexually active, there is a possibility.
Yes. The vaccine can be given at any age. There is no age limit. That target by the government is to target girls who are not yet sexually active. But even people who are sexually active, one can check themselves, one can be checked whether they have HPV and get vaccinated. Now, before I leave that topic, let me say this. There are 15 high-risk HPV viruses that can cause cancer of the cervix. Of those, there are 2 which are very bad. Of the 15, there are 2 a type 16 and a type 18, which actually cause about, in this country, in Kenya, cause about 70% of our cervical cancers. 30% is caused by the other 13 viruses. So the fact that one has had a vaccine does not mean that you're safe. One, the vaccine may not be 100%, and 2, there are still those other 13 that can cause the same. So yes, it's very, very good to have the vaccine. It will protect 70% of the time, because 70% of that, the cancer, is caused by those 2. But there is still others that will need to be screened. So please let people have the vaccine, but still do their annual checkup.
Well, we're still talking about the vaccine. Desireen, after you've said you've not seen the doctor since the surgery, but have you gotten the vaccine just to make sure that nothing ever comes back or you have to deal with something?
No.
At all?
Hapana.
I tell you, this is a woman of faith. All right, so Daktari, why wouldn't she take it? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, she still is prone to it.
No, she's not prone to cancer cervix.
Because there's nothing.
The cervix is not in her.
At all.
At all.
And it cannot
came
move
out.
to anywhere else.
Well, no, because that would have been when the cervix was still there, it would have moved the way the cancer metastasizes to other organs. Now for her, it was found to be containerized within that area of the reproductive system. So it hadn't moved to her lungs, it hadn't moved to her liver.
Yeah.
But even if it had moved to her lungs or her liver, the vaccine would not help. Because this means she's already been infected with the vaccine, and it's moved. There's nothing you can do once it's already moved. You protect with the vaccine before the infection actually happens. But once cancer is done, it means we have HPV. There's nothing we can do except remove the area that has cancer.
Okay, Mary, as you take care of your patients, how sensitized are they that there are these options we're talking about, the HPV vaccine, the pap smears that should be on an annual basis or more depending on your needs? How sensitized are women on this?
Actually, most women have heard about it, but kind of people don't want to imagine about the whole thing.
What
But
the
it is
whole
there.
thing?
Yeah, I mean about having cancer of the cervix. So you see, you're blocking it, but you don't want to have a lot of information about it. But most people are aware about it. At least it has been all over.
I think this sounds like the African mentality. When you write a will, you're calling death to yourself. So you'd rather not write it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the same idea here.
Yeah, and many times I tell people, you go for a pap smear, and it's like, I can't go for it, let it come for me. You know, it's like when you go there, you'll be diagnosed about it. But you see, there is early treatment. You can prevent it.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's that kind of fear that anytime you hear about cancer, it is death. That is not true. Yeah, it's not true.
Okay, Naserian, I know apart from being afraid of the cancer and the death for some that it comes with, there's also some cultural barriers, you know, traditional. Mama anafikiria tena kwenye daktari aoneshe uchi wake ndio apate testing. How is it with maybe where you come from and as far as going to the doctor for this help is concerned?
Enyewe kusema ukweli wanaogopa kwa sababu tayari wameshajua kansa sio mzuri. Ukishapata kansa ni kifo. So wanaogopa.
Na ile ya kuonesha uchi mwanaume ama daktari yeyote.
Hiyo kwanza ni ngumu sana.
Wanasemaje?
Hiyo ni ngumu. Wanaona hiyo ni aibu. Sababu saa zingine daktari ni mwanaume. Anaona hiyo kazi ni ngumu sana kwenda kumtolea.
Na kuna wakati ambapo mama anataka kwenda lakini mwanaume akifikiria yale ataenda kupitia kuonyesha uchi na any other things anamwambia afadhali kae.
Atamwambia hapana. Wacha nenda upewe dawa. Na utapona.
Kwa hivyo kuna wengi ambao wamekufa na cervical cancer.
Wengi.
Just because they never got the help they needed. Okay.
Kutopia waelewa.
How much of this is a reality, Daktari?
It is real. That women will just not be screened. Many, can you imagine, for two reasons? One, well, many know. Many now know. So we will not... Okay, let's say a few still do not know. But for those who know, they think that it's better to have the cancer already there than to go and look for it. I don't know how you look for it.
That makes sense.
And also others don't want to just be seen. And the biggest problem is that, you see, one is well. So why am I going to hospital? And that's what we really trying, or what is the burden in my heart, that we have to let women know cancer, cervix is a different kind of cancer. It's not like the other cancers. The other cancers, usually, when you are found with cancer, you're found with cancer. It's cancer. Cancer cervix is such a progression that we can catch it long before. So I want to try to make women understand you need to be screened. Do not fear that it's going to be cancer. It may not be cancer. And if it is cancer, before signs show up, it is so early that we can actually deal with it. And you don't have to live with cancer. So we aim to, we are starting an initiative called She Chooses to Live initiative that wants to make women really aware that cancer cervix is a reality. It is. Last year, as you say, it was diagnosed in newly more than 5,000 women in this country, newly diagnosed.
Yeah.
And at least 3,200 women died of it. And that is unacceptable in something that doesn't even really have to happen. So we are trying to make women aware. We are trying to make them get screened, because it is a good thing to be screened. This is not like other cancers. You may be screened for cancer liver, you're told you have cancer liver. It's cancer. Cervix, you are told it is progressing towards cancer, and you have actually time to deal with it before it becomes cancer. Or even if it's early cancer, it is dealt with before that time it becomes. In fact, she hasn't even told you about it all. The trouble with cancer cervix is this: it totally kills a woman's dignity. The cervix is near the bladder, the urinary bladder, and the cervix is near the rectum, the one that carries poo. Now, when cancer cervix is advanced, it has three things. One, it has I'll call it rotten meat from the cervix. The cancer itself is like breaking rotten meat. There is the smell of rotten meat. Then sometimes it goes to the bladder, makes rotten meat with urine. Then finally it goes to the rectum, or both. Makes urine, makes poo, and makes rotten meat, all coming through the birth canal of a woman. Talk to me about that woman.
She's here. Let her tell us her experience. How far along was it, and what were you dealing with?
Mi sikumbuki kweli vile zaidi mambo ilikuwa mpaka nikaenda kwa daktari. Sasa yeye ndiye aliweza kugundua hayo yote.
Lakini kuna vitu ambazo apart from the rashes?
Mi sikuona. Hapana.
Na huko unasumbuliwa na mwili?
Hapana.
Okay, so I guess for her it wasn't that.
No, she had no signs.
She had no signs
no
whatsoever.
No symptoms, no signs. We just did a routine pap smear.
Okay.
Yes.
And we found that she had it. Okay,
yes.
Mary, you're the one who walks with these patients, and she just painted a picture of what it is that they deal with. Just give us an indication of a day in the life of somebody who is living with cervical cancer. What are we dealing with?
Actually, this reminds me of a patient we had last year with actually severe cervical cancer end stage. And as she says, the smell is quite something. You keep on spraying the house and you spray, and it doesn't go away.
Spraying the house?
Spraying the house, it doesn't go away. It goes almost quite far. And you know, it loses the dignity of a woman. The family, you know, when visitors come, it's like they can't take long. It is that bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it is bad.
And when it is at the end stage, that means none of this, you evacuated some parts of her body to ensure that she did not have, or it did not have to spread elsewhere. When it's at the last stages, there's nothing you can do to help them along.
No, you can do irradiation to try to reduce the amount of cancer cells, the amount of cancer tissue, but there's not much you can do.
And when we say the last stages, we're talking about stage 4?
Yes.
We're talking about stage 4. Okay, you've dealt with different kinds of patients. I can imagine maybe in the urban areas, they have it a bit easier. How about the lady in the machinani, first, who does not know what she has? Secondly, she has all these symptoms and people will just shun her. How does that look like?
You know, people kind of sit to wait for her to die, because it seems like there's no hope, there's nothing else. You know, like as that spell comes, like, you know, she's already dead, we're just waiting. And you know, like in urban, at least people are able to get hold of a doctor, something. You can call a doctor. And doctors have been very good, who understands. Because anytime even a patient or the family can even call me, sister, what do we do about this? Symptoms come up here and there. So you have to deal with each one that comes with symptoms. So that's how now we take care of that patient at that kind of a stage. Yeah. So at Mashinani places, I mean, it's, I just don't know, but it is bad. Just wait. So kind of, even if people still go back to, they still go to work and they leave her alone or with somebody who can give her something to eat which she can eat. Otherwise, she's just left there to suffer. And the pain is usually the really thin, the smell, the discharge. I mean, emotionally she's drained. She feels so stressed up, depressed. All those comes in. All those comes in. And also the anger comes in. It's like nobody cares about me. Yeah. Because now it's like now people have given up on you, but they have tried their best for sure. Some of them have tried their best, but now it's like, now let's just wait.
And some have no idea what's going on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nasirian, how much of the people in your community understand what cervical cancer is, and they've been able to help or not help because they did not have the information? Kuna wamama ambao umeona wakiumia kwa sababu watu hawakuwa na any information kuhusu kile wana deal naye.
Yeah, wameumia zaidi, ni wengi. Kwa sababu wengine wanakuwa wagonjwa, unaona mtu anadhoofika, anapelekwa hospitali, haijulikani ni nini. Unaona wengine wanaanza kugharamia, wanataka kupeleka mpaka India, lakini wanafariki. Yeah.
Na wale ambao hawaelewi kabisa ni nini inamsumbua, so anaachwa tu pahali, kwa sababu tukiongea kuhusu hizo symptoms, si watu wengi wataweza kuwa na patience ya kumtunza.
Unajua sasa kama hiyo yote inatokea, unawekwa kando, kwa sababu sasa kama iko na hiyo shida ya harufu na nini, nani anataka kuwa karibu na wewe? Yeah. Naona ule ambaye atakuwa karibu na wewe atakupeleka hospitali, lakini wataona tu huyu ni wa kwenda tu. Yeah.
Na while we're speaking about it, let's talk about the myths. To each community their own myths. Sasa wakiona mama ambaye ako na uvundo, kuna vitu zinaendelea ambazo hawezi elewa, wanasema ni nini mbaya?
Sasa wao wajui ni kama sasa kwa upande wetu hawajui ni shida ni gani. Mara labda utapewa hizi madawa za kienyeji, manake hawajui shida ni gani. Yeah.
Okay. Na kuna wale ambao wanasema you're cursed, ama ni laana.
Sasa labda ni laana ya familia. Kuna kitu umefanya sasa ndio hiyo inakukula. Na kumbe sio hivyo. Ni kutoelewa.
Okay, Daktari, the reason I'm bringing up this myths and all is because we know it's a great impediment, first of all, to not only go for the screening, but also to catch some of this, the cervical cancers early enough to treat them. So how much of this has it been an impediment to trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve?
Oh, it's, shall I say, across the country, no women want to expose their nakedness for whatever reason, which is very sad, because I tell people it's another part of you, like the face. It needs to be checked. Okay, you don't go showing it to everybody, but you need to be checked. So the biggest impediment actually is that people just don't want to be looked at. If you are sick, if somebody is sick, they'll go. But if you are not sick, which is when we need them, they'll not come. And the other thing is, the other biggest thing is they just don't want to be told they have cancer. Those are the two biggest ones. Other than that, there is the trouble getting to some hospitals. Now, the government does something in the district hospitals and sub-county hospitals. There's some screenings that go on, but women will just not go. Yes. Yes. I think the biggest problem is fear of nakedness, and also fear of being told one has cancer. And maybe some people are just not aware. In the elite, they are aware.
Yeah,
But,
you can't explain why
yes.
somebody who knows why
Yes.
they have never gone for a pap smear,
Yes.
right?
Yes, difficult.
Okay.
Difficult.
Now, Mary, apart from nakedness, being the fear of nakedness or death itself, there's also another impediment, the cost. This HPV vaccine, we're saying go for it if you can, costs something, and not everyone can afford it. What is your experience with some of the patients or women that you've come across?
There are those ones who can afford, they go for it, but majority actually don't because of the cost implications. You know, because you already have other costs to deal with. Yeah. Pay the doctor, buy drugs. These are painkillers are very expensive to deal with such a kind of pain. Some, you know, are bedridden, you can't move anymore, you need to be turned, you need to deal with the bed sores. So there are some other costs which comes with it. So you find that very few who are able to go for the vaccine go for it. But you know, the question is, why wait until you reach there? You know,
Until
you can
you get
prevent
to
that
that
to go
point.
for pap smear every 6
For
months.
example, like now when you have the patient, there is a family member who is a lady who can see what they're going through. When you tell them of the options that there are, from the pap smear, from the HPV vaccine, what will they say? What is the reaction to it? Do they take it up, or do they also say, mahitaji yangu vis-a-vis going for the HPV vaccine, I'd rather take care of my needs?
A time will come when I'll go for that. That's what they tell you. You know, because you don't want to imagine, because every time you think you're told to go for a pap smear, you already have cancer. You know, you already know that you already have it,
Yes.
which is not the case. So I think they just need to think of, this is something that will help me, early diagnosis, and I can be able to work with it. Then waiting until it's actually at the, you know, fourth stage, then is when you can think about it. Yeah.
Okay, maybe Daktari, at this point you can tell us what's the importance of the HPV vaccine and how does it help reverse the process?
The HPV vaccine does not reverse any process.
How does it help you? Like now, if you're vaccinating girls at a certain age, what does it help them in as far as making sure they do not fall prey to cervical cancer?
Let me give an example of measles. You know, immunize children against measles.
Yes.
It's exactly the same. So that when measles virus comes, then the body is already immune to it. It's the same thing with the with HPV, human papillomavirus. So we vaccine against the human papillomavirus. So if an infection happens, then the body already has antibodies to fight it off.
Okay.
So it doesn't reverse a HPV that has happened. It protects it from entering the system.
But you said the vaccine does not make you immune to it. You still have to keep doing the tests.
Yes, because the vaccine, even if it was 100%, it protects against one genotype called type 16 and a bit against another one called type 18, which are only 2. We have 15 high-risk ones.
Okay.
So even if it was to protect 100% against those 2, which are the commonest, we'd still need to screen, because then one can fall prey to the other 13 types.
So how often for an adult should you get the HPV vaccine?
Once, well, the first lot, it's given in 3 doses, that's it.
Okay.
Yes.
So when I have it, maybe I had it 5 years ago.
Yes.
Should I revisit it again after a certain duration?
It's a new age vaccine, so it is thought that it will last 7 years. Now we haven't done 7 years, so we have to still say whether it will protect beyond 7 years or not, or whether we need another lot 7 years later. But that is still something on the talking.
Okay. All right, Naserian, vaccination, pap smear. There are many people who don't even understand that. But then again, the bigger impediment would be, do you even have a health facility near you for you to go for these things? Mashinani kuna kaaji na serikali ama county wanaweza saidiaje?
Kwa sasa hivi wanasaidia. Wanasaidia kwa sababu ukienda hospitali utaweza kupimwa na iweze kutambulika ya kuwa una hiyo shida. Lakini sasa shida ni hiyo vile sasa iko hapo mashinani pale unaenda ni mtu ambaye labda unamfahamu. Mtu anaona hapana. Wacha hata nigaramie niende mbali. Na sasa yule ana uwezo unaona
anaacha
na anaendelea akiumia.
Okay. For you as a nurse, Mary, what would you suggest be done in as far as accommodating the different needs, the different, impediments to getting the pap smear and the HPV vaccine if somebody is able to, because you cannot ignore the cultural influence in some of these decisions.
What I think is that we need to have education to the community, whether in churches, in our chamas. Let people be told many and many times, as much as it has been sung, but we still need to keep on singing to them so that people can understand that this is not a curse. This is a disease process within the body system. So people need to be told as many times as possible for it to sink. I know culture is very tricky because there are some states who actually sticks on that. And so, but with time, it is actually coming out. People are coming to understand it.
Okay, Dr. I read somewhere saying you do not know about HPV is like saying you don't know that HIV causes AIDS. The HIV virus causes AIDS. So literally there is a need for sensitization in as far as the HPV virus is concerned. How can the health stakeholders come in to ensure that this message goes to all and sundry?
First of all, in our country here, Kenya, the prevalence of HPV is actually very high. It's been found to be 38%, which is extremely high.
Yeah.
Some countries have about 4%. We have 38%. And then this thing is in East Africa and South Africa mainly, and Central America. That's where this burden of cancer cervix is. Not because that's the only place there is HPV, but that's the places where the screening is really not done. And the vaccine came recently, so we can't say that the other areas have done it because of vaccine. Now, the government is doing something. There is something called VIA, screening all over the place.
Even in public hospitals?
In public hospitals. There is something called visual inspection with acetic acid, we call it VIA. And that can tell you that there is a problem here. And there is also another type called VILI. So there is screening. And what I'm appealing to women is please get screened. Get screened wherever it is, wherever it is. Don't feel shy. Even with those ones, though they may not be very, very accurate, they'll tell you there's a problem. And then you need further checkup. So the government is doing a lot about it. It's not that the government is silent. I think it's the woman that needs to be told, go.
Taking charge.
Yes, and that's why this initiative of ours is called She Chooses to Live. I choose to be screened and not to die of cancer of cervix. Yes.
Okay, I have to ask Mary. We're saying we take charge and go for this cervical screening, yeah? But if I do not know the importance of it, I'll probably prioritize other things over this screening. So if reproductive health has been given the priority it has, a woman will always go to hospital for one thing or another. Whilst you're there, shouldn't the healthcare practitioners take it upon themselves to suggest, whilst you're here, can we check this?
Yeah, actually, like now with HIV, that's what they are doing. Anytime you walk to a hospital, they have to check, they explain to you about HIV. So I think actually what will actually help is actually any woman who walks in a hospital, let them do the screening. Let it just be like a mandatory.
Yeah.
And they just need to counsel and explain to them the importance of it. The problem is people have a mentality which is already fixed in their mind.
Yeah.
But as they keep on being talked to them, counseling them, people will be able to understand. And you see, after you get those results and they are negative, you come out, you're happy about it. Yeah. But anyway, even if it comes out positive still,
something can be done.
Something can be done early enough.
Yeah. I find this very interesting because women are said to live longer because they're the ones, when they cough, they run to hospital. Men will probably sit back until they're crawling on their knees. But there's this one thing that it seems to be holding us back. Na Serian, in as far as mashinani, ungetaka watu wafanye nini ndio angalau wasaidie wamama, kwa sababu kuna wale hawataenda wenyewe. Ile ukiingia hospitali mtu anakuambia unaweza ingia hapa jameni tuangalie hii na hii. Itasaidia?
Kwanza ni mtu kama mimi ambaye nimepitia hayo. naweza kutana na mama nimuone hali yake, namwambia vile utafanya, nenda hospitali ukaangaliwe, kwa sababu saa zingine ugonjwa huwezi jua ni ugonjwa gani uko naye. Ukishapimwa itajulikana na utaweza kusaidika. So inafaa tuweze kuelimisha, waweze kuelezwa kama ni makanisani, wasiogope. Hata vile tunakuwa na hii machama ya kina mama, tujaribu kuelezana, kufundishana, na wale ambaye tayari wako naye tunawape moyo ya kuwa si mwisho wa maneno. Bado kuna uhai na mambo mazuri baadaye.
Very well said. Okay, now Daktari, as we wrap up this conversation, somebody is asking, how is it that we're hearing of more cervical cancer cases now? Is there anything in our lifestyle or lifestyle changes that have contributed to the numbers increasing?
No, HPV, which causes cervical cancer, is sexually transmitted. This follows that the more sexual partners somebody has, the more the chances they are going to get HPV infection and get cancer. Now that's not even enough. The more partners their partner has,
Mpango wa kando.
the more chances they will get HPV and transmit it to the woman. Now I would like to say here that condom does not, I repeat, does not protect against human papillomavirus.
Wait.
Yes.
So wait, it can protect you from a HIV virus,
Yes.
but it cannot protect,
It can protect you from HIV, it can protect you from gonorrhea, because those are ejaculate material. HPV is all over the genital area, including towards the rectum, all over the genital rectal area, on the skin. So condom does not protect. So the fact that somebody is having a mupabgo or a kado with a condom, it doesn't protect against that. So yes, that's I think maybe it's the immorality of the country that has made us, I will not call it immorality, because really one doesn't know that they have HPV. Even the woman doesn't know until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So I would only speculate that that's what has made it, and also the awareness that we are talking more cancer cervix now. We are talking more openly about it. But yes, that's the sexual activities is part of what causes so much of it.
Okay. All right. Now, Mary, with your palliative experience, I'm sure you have seen many different scenarios in as far as cervical cancer is concerned. What would be your clarion call to women going forward and just society at large?
Let's move forward and go for checkups. Very important. Let's not have that mentality of, I already have the cancer. No. And for those ones who already have, let's be supportive to the family. Let's be supportive to the patient. Very important. Yeah.
Okay. Nasirian,
Yeah.
you were diagnosed many years later. You're still here with us, so clearly it's not a death sentence. Ungetaka kuambia wamama vipi?
Mimi naambia kina mama waende hospitali, wasiogope. Si kwamba ati ukienda hospitali uko na kansa, bali weenda tu upimwe hiyo pap smear. Kama kuna shida yoyote itajulikana, kama hakuna basi uko sawa. Yeah.
Okay. And Daktari, we can find these services in public hospitals as you can in private hospitals. Okay. How affordable are they?
They are affordable. In public hospitals, they're free.
Okay.
In private hospitals, a pap smear screening will take about 2,000. What is 2,000 in a year? Yeah.
It's a good investment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
May I say something finally?
Okay.
that I know I have said this is sexually transmitted, and this will augur not nicely in families, which is not the case. I've said that this human papillomavirus can live in somebody for 10 to 20 years before it manifests. So this is not to say that now you have mpagwakado because I have HPV today. I could have gotten it 20 years ago before, and it's showing up now.
Yeah.
So it's not a reflection of what is going on in marriages now. It could be, but it's not necessarily a reflection. It is a reflection that at some point in the past 20 years, somebody did get HPV.
All right. Ladies, thank you so much for that conversation. Cervical cancer and the importance of the HPV vaccine, and you going for that pap smear. Remember, as of last year, December 2018, 5,250 women were newly diagnosed with cervical cancer, and over 3,000 of them actually succumbed to it. But as Dr. said, this is something that can be reversed, so it is unnecessary deaths if only we all took time to go for that pap smear, for that screening, and get the vaccine. And as far as for those who are concerned, is if it's possible for those that can afford that. Now, remember, the government actually put it out there. They were going to roll out this vaccination process for girls between 10 and 13. That hasn't happened yet. We shall keep finding out why and how, but definitely today we've learned the importance of the HPV vaccinations. We've been talking to Dr. Jane Wakahe. She's a gynecologist, obstetrician, reproductive health expert, Mary Mudave, a palliative nurse, and of course Rahab Nasirian Kisopie, who is somebody who was a patient, a cervical cancer patient, but today she lives cancer-free. Thank you for joining us on this conversation. I see your questions on Twitter. I will be forwarding some of them to Dr. to give you more insight on some of these queries. But even as we take a short break, remember today is the first World Food Safety Day. That conversation will be coming up in the next hour. Stay with us. reporters who are on the ground bringing us current affairs from different parts of the country. But in studio now, having that conversation on World Food Safety Day. Now, here's the thing. Today is actually the first ever World Food Safety Day adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in December 2018, and it's being celebrated today, again, as I said, the 7th of June 2019, under the theme Food Safety, Everyone's Business. Now, to help us understand what this is about and how it actually applies to us as a country, with me in studio, I've got Henning. You said I should call you Henning who? Nyaga. Well, he has a very hard name, but yes, he is from the Royal Danish Embassy, Dunedin. Thank you for joining us. Next to him is Dr. Alan Azegere, who is a directorate from the Directorate of Veterinary Services. We have Dr. Mercy Lungaho, and she is from the Food and Agriculture Organization. She is a representative from there. And of course, Dr. Andrew Edewa, who is from UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Thank you for joining me. Now, let's start with the fact that this is the first ever World Food Safety Day. What does that mean for us as a country, but most importantly, universally? Henning.
I think it's important to create awareness of the importance of food safety worldwide, and maybe both put consumers and put businesses and put the public sector together and work on common issues to understand how we improve food safety.
Okay, Dr. Lungaho, for us as a country, how important is this day?
For me as a nutritionist, I look at food as a starting point for energy, our well-being, and general happiness. We often take food safety for granted, and today we're bringing food safety to the spotlight and asking the question, how can everybody, all of us, take the responsibility to prevent, to detect, and even manage foodborne risks. As a country, we often talk about food security, but there's no food security without food safety. So as FAO, we're really pushing this day, and we're happy to bring awareness to food safety.
And for you, Dr. Andrew, how important is this day?
Yeah, this is a very important day for all actors that produce food. Food business operators, they are involved in one way or another in producing and supplying food. It is your responsibility to make sure that the food that you produce and supply is safe. Yes.
And Alan?
Yeah, as a country, this is one of the greatest achievements we've managed to get to, because this is a day that we have lobbied to have. And we are proud to be part of the League of Nations who championed this process through the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which was the one which proposed the adoption of this day to the United Nations. And we are happy that it came to fruition during my time.
Okay, and definitely this is a first of very many to come.
Very many.
Okay.
It will be a standard, a date that will be celebrated annually. Yeah.
Okay,
Going
now
forward.
let's get into the nitty-gritties of it. I mean, from the Kenyan context, we have dealt with so many issues in as far as food safety is concerned. The biggest, I think, every Kenyan can attest to is aflatoxin. You know, we've had about the maize, we've had about some of it in peanut butter just a few weeks back, and the question is, how is it that we've gotten to a point where food is being contaminated so often than it was before? Dr. Lungaho.
That's an interesting question, but I think it's not that food is being contaminated more often. I think it's because we're more aware. And I love what the media has done to bring awareness towards food safety, to run those stories. What I see as FAO, we have looked at the problem and brought about tools that can help to rapidly test for aflatoxin. So the fact that we have technologies to test for it, we have platforms to talk about it, we hear it more frequently, and that's why we're bringing awareness to the consumer, to say, as a consumer, when I walk into a posho mill or I go to buy grain, I should ask the person selling it to me, has this been tested for aflatoxin? Do you know how much is in it? Because if I take responsibility as a consumer, then the entire food chain will become more responsible towards communicating to me the safety of my food and ensuring that my food is safe.
Now, Dr. Andrew, you're Kenyan. We've been through this a long time, and she's saying we're more aware now. That's why we're talking about it. Are we saying we're coming from a point where we probably were consuming without knowing what's going on, and maybe even now paying for it health-wise for a long time?
Yes, it is true, because now is when you are beginning to see the real effects of food safety, because some happen after a long time of exposure. Some are very instant, like you fall sick after eating unsafe food. But others will take some time, and it could lead to increased cases of cancer and those kind of things. But given that as a country now we have diagnostic technologies to be able to find out exactly what the problem is, then you realize that now we begin to see this more and more. However, our food, the food supplies, whether it is from plants, whether it's from animals, our food always has the risk of something unsafe in it. And this food is not food if it is carrying something that's unsafe. And this is the awareness that we need to create and have everyone responsible for the production and supply of the food, address those issues wherever the food is being produced or supplied. Yes.
All right. And Dr. Allen, speaking of the production of it and the supply of the same, clearly you will find in some cases where the producer will say when it left me it was fine, but by the time it was getting to its destination, something was wrong, which was the case with the peanut butter case. At what point do now those in, in charge ensure that all the processes are kept in check to ensure by the time it's coming to my table, it's still safe for Kenya?
Yeah, every food business operator has responsibility to ensure the food that he produces is safe for consumption. And as government, we have put in place various laws that govern the activities within the food chain. So at production of the peanuts, as you say, the farmer is actually a food business operator producing peanuts, which should be well handled and stored, because the storage conditions have an influence on the aflatoxin development through the molding. Now, thereafter, as he hands it over to the processor has to play his part and first be able to check, is it free of aflatoxins or molding? Is it kept well? And if I process it into peanut butter, am I sure that there is no contamination or any presence of aflatoxins in it? Now, when he releases it to the supply chain that reaches the consumer, whoever will handle that transport and storage, all the conditions around that and any damage to the packaging that could have occurred during that period, it's the responsibility of that trader to see to it that it's done well. So everybody within that chain, if you check, and at each stage, the laws that we have in place have clear guidelines on what you should achieve as a trader. So if you violate, that's when we come in and enforce the law and the penalties that follow. And that is not geared towards punishing the trader only, is to make sure you protect the consumer from harm. So the law is not designed only to punish any wrongdoers, but also to protect you from that harm.
Okay.
Yes.
So at this point, the question would be, we have found products on our shelves that have the rubber stamp of the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and because of that, I will pick it up and say it's safe for me. Then you get home, you open, and clearly what's inside is not good for you. At what point then have we been dropping the ball? Because the conversations have been there, and we have instances where the system seemed to have been bypassed, or what are we missing here?
It's more or less the regulator takes samples and verifies. So whatever sample you verify from production and the batch taken periodically, it's not a continuous, or you don't test everything. So once in a while you may find something on the shelf, probably with a mark, but I wouldn't say that all the products that have that mark of quality from Kenya Bureau of Standards may be safe, because the parameters the Kenya Bureau of Standards may be looking at may be different, specifically based on the declaration of the manufacturer. Now, when it comes to, say, Ministry of Health or Agriculture or other institutions, they are very specific with what they have to do in the same chain. So at the end product, Ministry of Health has a very significant role in the environment of that food and what is in that. So when it's off, the responsibility is with the Ministry of Health to take action. But it's not possible to test every product that comes. So whenever it occurs, it's important for the consumer to report to either the Kenya Bureau of Standards and the Ministry of Health that I found this, and also the company, so that a traceback mechanism is put in place.
Okay, for you, Henning, definitely you come in as a partner in this, and just listening to how the system works in the country. How do we ensure that now, Kenya being one of the member states that's actually putting this in place and is very aggressive about it, that they take responsibility for each stage and to ensure that that consumer is protected?
Yes, the Danish government, both the Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Veterinary and Food Administration have worked very close with the Kenyan government for the last 3 years on a food safety program we call the Strategic Sector Collaboration Program on food safety. And I very much agree with Alan on the turnaround, the need for a turnaround on the food control system in Kenya. And there has been a lot of initiatives going on for the last couple of years. And I think it's a very significant point to make that the food business operators in the whole chain need to know their own risk. Because food is being consumed all the time, and the flow is so big you cannot control every single product finally produced. And it will, even if you detect some pollution, contamination, it's gone, and the traceability is maybe not that tight in the chain. So the system that we work with in Europe, that we try to share knowledge about, is to have a quality system where all the competent authorities in Kenya, which are many, that have mandates and sometimes overlapping mandates, that they work very well together to harmonize and know what each part is doing, and to make a turnaround in the food control system, putting the responsibility back to the food business operator, which is also said here. And I think that process is going on right now. It's a very good development for Kenya. Of course, there are still many challenges, but that's very natural. And we have been through, in Denmark, we have been through a lot of challenges too. And we are very happy that we have a nice and good collaboration, and we can share our experiences on this work. I would say on the consumer awareness, of course it's very important that the public sector also play a role to share information. But it's also a role of the private companies, that they share information on labeling and so on, what is actually in the food and what is the potential risk. And that is a system that the public sector should set up. So to make that feedback and that control system, we work on a multi-annual national control plan in Kenya, right now. It's been a process for some time, but that is definitely the way to go.
Okay. Now, Dr. Lungaho, you're very passionate about nutrition, and Kenya has been grappling with foodborne diseases. We're talking about the outbreak of cholera especially, and this seems to be recurrent because we are not only now dealing with the food safety, we're talking about sanitation, proper sanitation, lack of it. We're talking about lack of enough water, which is also very important in the handling of all these products we're talking about. How important is it to reel in other stakeholders to ensure that we keep up the quality assurance, so to speak?
I love that question because it emphasizes the theme of this year's World Food Day. It's everybody's responsibility. Unfortunately, sometimes we work in silos. As consumers, we don't know who our go-to person is. As researchers, we don't talk well to consumers. So I think we need a platform, and FAO provides that platform to bring stakeholders together to talk about how to mitigate foodborne diseases, how to act in an emergency setting. FAO has a very powerful partnership with the World Health Organization, WHO, and WHO works at the consumer end. When there's an outbreak, they come in to mitigate. But we need to all work together, like everyone has said on the panel. And I'm challenging the media to set up platforms where we can more often talk about emerging issues and issues that we have long struggled with, because we need those platforms now to address food safety.
Okay, Dr. Andrew, let's talk about, when you talk about cholera and all that, people in the Kenyan setting will be thinking vibanda. You know, that's where we go wrong. But the truth of the matter, we have also reported that high-end restaurants have had an outbreak of the same. So what are we missing out on, and what should be tightened on our end?
Indeed, you are right. That is not just the vibanda where we have got food safety concerns. You had even higher-end hotels, people eating and falling sick. This is a concern then that where do I go and eat? Which confidence? Where do I go? Our tourists, when they come, how safe are they? And you can see the economic importance of food safety in this sense. While on the other hand, we're looking at the health aspects of food, about the burden of disease that comes from cholera and other outbreaks. The economic impact is really high. So as UNIDO, which is the UN Industrial Development Organization, we look at first the business sector, trying to say exactly that they have in place systems that can ensure that when food is produced, then it is processed or manufactured and packaged, and then supplied in a manner that ensures that there is no possibility, or we minimize the possibility of contamination as the food then moves to the next stage, and the next one, and the next one. Now, where have we gone wrong as a country? I think that, as my colleagues have said, there needs to be a more coordinated approach. First, we should know that food production and supply is not a one-person's business. It entails the interconnectedness of businesses and actors along that chain, from the time you produce all the way up to the time it's consumed on the table. And in each of those steps, something is likely to go wrong. Either there are dirty personnel handling food, or the environment which you are producing that food itself is contaminated and is very bad, or you are using water that is dirty and cannot meet those conditions of producing food, or you have got pests running around, cockroaches or rats everywhere, and which then contaminate the food. All those factors. And this is what at every stage we need to examine and see that controls are put in place. So as UNIDO, we help the business sector first in understanding the standards. Which standards need to be put in place, should be met, in order that when food is produced and supplied, that it does not fail at the next stage. And these standards then have got to be acquired from national standards bodies, who also in turn acquire this from Codex, which is the international body that is with standards under the FAO and WHO framework. So the standards then come. So again, UNIDO therefore has a responsibility then to work with the government to ensure that there is infrastructure for testing, for setting standards, for inspection, and all those things that need to be done by government in terms of building the capacities. And so currently we have a program also running in the country that's called Markup. Markup is a market upgrading program which looks at supporting various food supply chains to make sure that as the food is produced and supplied, that this food has been taken care of at every stage, so that the consumers are not then exposed to a situation that they will not otherwise themselves control.
Yes.
So government then has to buy, say, laboratory equipment, must train their inspectors, and they must then certify the products which go to the market. While the private sector, beginning with the farmers and the transporters and the retailers, make sure that at every point they keep the standards. And once they are certified, then this food is then approved, and the government then watches as a just audits to see that the system is running.
Yeah.
This is what is missing food in Kenya, and we are trying to put in place a system.
Okay, yes. And speaking of which, the government being the big brother who is watching, and we know when we go to the high-end restaurants, we then, on that door to the kitchen, no admission. We never know what happens behind there. In the kibanda, you go there, the food is already prepared, it's just being served to you. What is the government doing to ensure that they do maybe random spot checks, or just to ensure that the quality of the food that goes down our throats is of utmost standards, because we cannot get rid of the mama kibanda because of the economic status of the country, but also if you're also getting sick from the high end, then something needs to be done.
Yes, a lot of factors come into play in that situation, but most importantly, whenever you have to handle food, your health status must be clear, and within the law you're required to have a medical certificate, a food handler certificate, which is prescribed and it renewed every 6 months. But that doesn't guarantee your health, because health is a dynamic situation. You may be healthy today, but in another 3 days you're suffering a cold or something. So in event of falling sick, it's important that any food handler has to go and get treatment. Now, when you say Mama Kibanda, you see, you find there is a challenge where this is her source of income. She may fall sick, seek treatment, not from a hospital, but just over-the-counter treatment, and go back to handle that food. So you find our health teams, it's a challenging area to monitor, because they may be here today and not sell there again the following day, because they tend to move sometimes from point to point. But what is very critical is whenever anybody handles food, in terms of trade, you must have at least a medical certificate to certify that you are healthy enough to handle it. Furthermore, whatever you do, make sure the environment is clean. Now, the county governments, I think they are making efforts to designate areas where food, we call it street-vended foods, can be handled and prepared and sold to the public. Those facilities are important, and the designs, I think they must be consulting very closely with the Ministry of Health and National Office, so that any time you go to a place, any town, any city within the country, you should know that if you want to get any street vended food, you'll get it in this area, and the facilities are provided: clean water, clean environment, good sanitation facilities, and the persons are also medically fit. Now, without an organized system of managing street vended foods, you'll have that challenge where you cannot guarantee that, as a government, you can't guarantee that, but it's the obligation of that Mama Mboga, as you call her. And on the same light, food handling, cabbages, sukuma wiki, you've seen what goes on. It's put in the open.
And you even ask the mama mboga to cut it for you.
Yes. Slice it for you.
Yeah.
Yet it's always important that the place where she's doing that business, it needs to be covered and not exposed to a lot of dust. Because this is food. And you may imagine I'm going to cook it anyway. But there are organisms which produce what we call toxins.
Yes.
You can't cook toxins out of food. They will always persist, and when you consume it will be very delicious, but at the end of the day you have a very situation where you have to spend time in the loo, driving a bus that you cannot control. So it comes, those are situations I'm sure most of us have had to experience,
dealt with, yeah.
and you wonder why, yet it didn't seem like it was off order.
Okay.
That's the situation that arises when you handle food in an unsanitary condition.
Okay, now just an experience from Europe and how you handle. You rarely see mama bloggers, and we're talking about the small scale traders on the side of the road.
Still have.
Do you deal with that?
We still
how do
have.
you reel it in to make sure that quality assurance is upheld?
We follow the same principles for small vendors or for big companies. The same principles. But of course, there's different risk. If a big company produces a lot of food for a lot of people and they do it in the wrong way, there's a big risk. So of course, we put more attention to where the big risks are. So that's the risk assessment. It's a very, very important part of our system, that you control where the biggest risks are. Because that will create huge problems if contaminated food reach hundreds of thousands of people. But the basic principles are the same, that we ask the food business operator to show us, the authorities, how they control and how they ensure that the food is safe, that they actually know how to cook in a hygienic way in the restaurant. So we would never put the blame on the authority, that they are the ones to ensure that the food is safety. That is the food business operator. So when you come to a restaurant, it's about how the inspector asks the questions and how he inspects, how she inspects. And the inspection will mainly be to put the questions to the owner. Show me how you ensure that everything is done in a hygienic way. So if something goes wrong in the restaurant and people get ill, you don't point the finger at the authority, but you point it at the restaurant owner. And if he cannot show how he's doing things in a proper way, we can close down the business. We can put administrative fines. And those instruments is very important to have, because then you know it hurts if you don't know the rules and the legislation and you cope with it, then we take action.
Okay.
And that's the small one, and it's also the big one. And the bigger fines.
The bigger the problems.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Lungaho, we are also dealing with something of, the presence of veterinary residues in our food. We're living at a time where one of the pillars of the Big Four agenda is food security, and we're trying to ensure that there's food in the market people can eat. But then again, we are going the way of ensuring that things are multiplied faster than usual. You know what I'm talking about, the antibiotics, the GMOs and what have you. And we are consuming all these things. But then again, people do not understand the importance of how much is too much. How is that being reeled in the Kenyan context?
I love the questions because they really drive the point that we need to do more. At the FAO, what we have realized is that we have to build capacity across the value chain. What you're discussing, many consumers don't know, or if they know, they don't have accurate information. As consumers, we don't know what information we should look for to guide us in choosing the right foods. So we build capacity. There's opportunity to build a capacity from the producers, the people who are using this veterinary supplies wrongly. We can build that. And by building that capacity, we allow people to do what he's exactly saying, take the responsibility to ensure that the food they produce is safe. And when we enforce then and measure to see if the residues are acceptable, then we'll be able to take the actions, like he says, to find them or even just publicize that what they're doing is wrong. I love what we're doing as a country in creating certification. For example, we have producers in Tharaka Nithi who have been trained on good agricultural practices, and they have a certification that they put on their packaging. So because as a consumer I'm educated on what to look for, when I go to buy my tomatoes, I look for their label because I know they're applying the right practices in producing what they produce. And I'd love for this information to become commonplace. How do we educate the common mwananchi on what to look for as quality? Even in developing countries, they simplify it. They give it a simple label that you can go and look for, so you don't have to read the entire story of how things were produced. Yeah. So if you can create a system that allows it to be easy for people to do the right thing and easy for the consumer to look for the right food for them, I think we can change the food system.
Okay, so the consumer can read and say, no, I will not consume this. I'll move on to the one that looks safe for me because it's been certified. But we do know that corruption lives in this country, and the person actually bringing the food to you could have bypassed the process. We're trying to also thrive in an environment where the climate change is working against us. So food is not growing as it should have because the rains have failed us. We've gone the greenhouse way. If it's the animals, we're helping them grow along so that we can be able to move on the chain. So what can be done on a Kenyan context for the producers especially to understand the damage they inflict down the chain?
I think first with regard to the residues of veterinary drugs, I'm sure Dr. Zegele will add something later on that. But this only constitutes one of the many problems that occur right at farm level. Residues of veterinary drugs, because you are treating animals and then you are told to wait by the veterinary officer on the ground. It says you don't milk or don't swallow this animal until this number of days are passed. But we don't wait because money has taken precedence. So then we rush, we harvest our milk, our fish, and all those commodities that have been administered with veterinary drugs. Those are very dangerous. And so the remedy there, yes, including also for crops, you may spray your tomatoes, you may spray your cabbages against the insects. That was the purpose. But then this pesticide, the chemical that you are applying, while it was meant to kill the insect, you then harvest the crop, but it has residue of it there. And the same way it kills the insect, it has an effect on the human body. And this is some of the reasons why we have increased cancer cases in areas where people eat food which has been applied with so many chemicals. And so the solution at that level is to train farmers, to teach farmers, to make them aware that these dangers do occur, and show them how to do it, what we call in this jargon, good agriculture practices at the farm level. But then when it moves to the next level, other actors have got responsibilities. If you are buying from the farms, then you need to know which farm you are sourcing it from. And so within that domain of the business, then they also are going to ensure that other problems beyond what happened at the farm is not again introduced. And this again should be done in the controlled environment of doing what we call good manufacturing practices and implementing standards which can then be certified again. So we certify the products that they meet those standards which have been set to address those food safety concerns, because that's the easy way of doing it, to then get these products certified, then they are released. But even when they're released in the marketplace and you buy, it does not mean that it is safe if you have a label. And even if it was safe and you bought a very safe product and took it to your house, and as a consumer, you have a role to play, because some of them must be kept in the fridge. Some must be cooked before eating, because if you don't cook properly, then again you swallow the bacteria, which may have problems, and it could be hanging around there. Those who are storing, you find people mixing things in the fridge. Meat, milk is inside there, other stuff inside there, and it does cross-contamination. And all these things together require training. And the media in particular, with the interaction you have with the public, you have a big role to play. To educate, to have certain topics being addressed clearly, to inform the public that it's not that everything that comes and reaches their table, even if it had a label and the government had done their part, that it is now safe. They have a role to play.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, our role to play at this point is to ask the right questions.
Yes.
So, Dr. Allen, we know about a certain fast food restaurant that said it will no longer use antibiotics in its chicken, but it said this will not be this case in Kenya, and we're still seeing them in business. What does that mean?
Hey, it has far-reaching implications. But it's clear we wouldn't accept any product which has you've used antibiotics as growth promoters to get into our system. That is not accepted even in our laws. We do not allow for use of antibiotics as growth promoters. That is out. Now, more importantly, besides the challenge of having veterinary drug residues in food, we have also the other challenge of antimicrobial resistance coming up. Because when you use these drugs as growth promoters, they challenge the bacteria, you expose the bacteria more to these drugs, and they develop resistance. This is the same bacteria that is going to infect you. And when you go to hospital, the drug to be used to treat and contain that bacteria is the same one that was given to that animal. And therefore you find a lot of treatment failures, and you spend more time in hospital under treatment or using more expensive drugs. So the cost of healthcare becomes too high. And even putting to risk the universal healthcare program that we really are looking at. And on the other hand, you are also affecting the food security that we really should be looking out for. So use of antibiotics as growth promoters, that is out. And also farmers, we know the challenge that comes whenever you have administered a drug to say a group of chicken, laying chicken. Those eggs need to be destroyed. If it's milk, you need not put that milk into for sale. You need to pour it out. Now, there is a challenge, because as a farmer, you have a big milker here, giving you almost, say, 30 liters on a daily basis. This is your source of income. It has fallen sick, you've treated, and you're told that milk has to be poured out. Now, think about it the other way. If you put it into the market, it will reach your son, your grandson, your brother, your sister. If you take it out of the system, you've saved all those relatives from harm at the expense of that, you know, the cost. Because eventually, when there's a hospital bill, you see on WhatsApp, you have to contribute, and there could be 3 because of your action. So it's important that we recognize how important it is to observe the guidelines from the professionals. Whenever you are a producer of either eggs, milk, or any agricultural produce, the guidelines from the professional teams should be followed for the safety of the produce and also safety of yourself and your relatives. It's not somebody else's who is going to suffer. It's yourself.
Yeah, the ripple effect is immense. Now, Henning, even as we finish this, you come from a part of the world where food preservation is, you know, #1. There's a lot of preservatives that goes into foods. Here in Kenya, mostly in Africa, we do a lot of fresh foods, but for some reason, it seems to have worked for you. But then again, it leaves a gap for food adulteration, yes, it is. So how is it that you ensure that you get the right food, but still ensure that no adulteration is done?
It's the same. It's back to the same point that I tried to make before, that it is the producer or the handler or the restaurant, the transporter, that has to know how to handle and follow the law. So we make the law, and then it is their responsibility to understand and also translate the law into their circumstances. So we don't come and say, in your specific case, you have to do this and this ABC to follow the law and to avoid contamination or alteration and so on. So it's their problem if they don't understand. Of course, you can have stakeholder engagement. We talked about it before. I think it's very important in Denmark. It's also very important in Kenya that the government is also playing a facilitating role of bringing stakeholders together. The private sector, the trade organizations, they come together. They understand that they have a responsibility. They also get better quality if they put the requirements down the chain. I mean, to their suppliers. We don't want this quality milk. We work in our strategic sector collaboration program on food safety. We work on two subsectors, the horticulture sector and the dairy sector. And we have showcased how important it is that county government, that the private stakeholder organizations, cooperatives, everybody that work in a certain area and a certain sector, that they agree on the way food should be handled, because it improves everybody in the chain. But it's also about money. You know, if I, as a producer, say I will not take your milk if it's not on this and this and this standard, I will not pay, or I will even pay less, or I will pay more for the good quality, then it is easier to understand for the farmer, for example, that it gives more money in the pocket to provide good quality.
Okay.
It's a very clear message to send, I think.
All right. Yeah. So the consumer here is key. So if they are empowered, the ripple effect would definitely be what we want it to be. So even as we close, lady and gents, food safety, everyone's business, is a theme of this first World Food Safety Day. Your clarion call, Dr. Lungaho.
For me, as a mother, as a consumer, as a researcher, I see my different roles. I'm asking all consumers to look at it that way. One consumer can be a producer. They might be the farmer. Someone else might be the one who owns the supermarket. How do they bring food safety to the spotlight in every role that they play to ensure that all of us enjoy safe food?
And for you, Dr. Andrew?
3 key messages. 1, for the food business operators, it's the responsibility of every actor to make sure that within their domain, their scope of food, that the food is safe. Otherwise, it's punishable by law, and you don't want to go that way. To the government, I think there is all the tools that you need to make these things work, but there needs to be a coordinated approach by all institutions to carry out this food safety regulatory function to ensure that the public receives safe food. To the consumer, and this is also where the civil society comes in. They have a responsibility. You as consumers, you need to make sure that you know what you are eating. Eat safe food, and please seek for more information about the food that you eat. Seek on how it should be prepared. Seek on the risk that may be carried by that food. And for the civil society, it's important that we assist in this awareness creation. The media has a big role because interact with the public to convey clear messages about food safety, especially on this World Food Safety Day. Developing partners here, I must not forget the EU having given support even for this program here, currently supporting Kenya on making sure that food supply chains, dairy, fish, fresh fruits and vegetables, all those are safe. And this is through a program called Agrify, and another one called Market Upgrading Program, Markup, under UNIDO and GIZ. We will be so happy that we take advantage as a government of such development assistance to make sure that the money is utilized properly to improve food safety, especially Kenya.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Allen, you're representing the big brother and the buck stops, you know, at your doorstep, your clarion call.
The clarion call is let's all come together and keep our food safe. It's not my responsibility alone. Big Brother wants all of you to come together and realize that food safety is all our business.
Henning, you are a partner, but definitely World Food Safety Day is not a Kenyan day, it's an universal day, your clarion call.
I hope we can keep on assisting Kenya and have a very good collaboration on improving food safety here. And I think Kenya is moving towards a one line control unit in a food authority, and I think that is really the way to go, and I think that will improve this agenda we are talking about today.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Henning Nyaga is what we're working with. The Royal Danish Embassy, Dr. Mercy Lunghao, Food and Agriculture Organization representative, Dr. Andrea Dewa, United Nations Industrial Development Organization representative, and Dr. Alan Azagere, who is from the Directorate of Veterinary Services. Thank you for your time, and definitely a good perspective of what the World Food Safety Day is. It is the first of its kind, but as we are saying, it is the first of very many others, and everyone within that chain is responsible for the food that you actually partake of. So let's take responsibility and live a healthier life. Thank you for watching NTV today. My name is Gladys Gachanja. NTV Sasa starts right after this.